Greetings, my interweb folks, and welcome to another video. This series will be a movie merit mentions. Sorry, I'm still a little sick, but it's alright. This series will be dedicated to basically discussing different movies that I've watched in my lifetime. And what I'm gonna do is basically it's kind of a defending these movies because they either get a lot of hate or they're more underrated. So that's what this series will be focusing on. Um, and I will be basically trying to back up with claims and try to lay forth maybe some sense into some of these movies. Maybe give you a better idea or try to change your perspective on a certain movie so that way you won't hate it or you won't view it in the way you did before. And of course, we're going to start off with The Amazing Spider-Man. Um, this movie does not get mentioned at all. This movie does not exist in the world right now. Nobody talks about this movie, which is, to me, I find it really saddening considering it's my favorite movie actually besides The Maze Runner, which is a movie that is mentioned more often, but The Amazing Spider-Man is ignored by the majority, and I just wanted to discuss how I feel about that personally and what I think the movie means to me in many different aspects. So, The Amazing Spider-Man came out in 2012 starring Andrew Garfield as the web slinging superhero. And this movie was um, directed by Mark Webb, I believe. And I don't know who the producers are or who wrote it. I think the writer was Mark Webb. Either Mark Webb was the writer or director, but I know that much for sure. And yes, this movie came out in 2012, and this was a darker take on the famous superhero that we all know and love. And I think personally, with this superhero, I think the direction they took in the Amazing Spider-Man is an interesting one because they wanted to be unique. I felt they tried their best to make the movie as unique and special as possible. Um, I want to start off with the suit. Let's just start off with the suit. Um, a lot of people have complaints about this suit and how it was a major disappointment. It looked weird, uh, uh, or more, for more, how do I say it, logical terms, I guess a basketball would be what a lot of people would compare it to. Personally, and this is just remember, guys, this is all my opinion. So I'm going to start off with my the suit right now. I think the way they took it on was very unique and special because it looks nothing like the other versions from Sam Raimi's and as well as the newer Spider-Man for Tom Holland. This suit is more different and unique, and I felt it was right to do that because if they tried to make it similar to the other ones, it would have been, to me, boring. To me, it would have been stale, mediocre, bland type of situation, in which I think they definitely went in the right direction when they made the suit the way they did. Um, but I feel I have no complaints with the way the suit looks. I just think that it's completely different from the other ones, and I guess that's the thing that got people maybe riled up or something of that sort is that the suit is just completely different. It's could be off-putting for some, but I definitely think that the suit for sure has its own beautiful, unique look to it. So, yeah. That being said, all right, we're moving on next to Andrew Garfield. I guess is his portrayal of Peter Parker and his portrayal of Spider-Man and how he took the role as Peter Parker. At first, you may, when you take a glance at his character and the way he plays him out, he may seem like a punk. He may seem like this um jock at first, and I get that vibe too off of him, and I understand that's because he's a skateboarder and he's just, this doesn't act nerdy. You may seem that you may think that he's not a good portrayal and that he didn't uh, perfect the role of Peter Parker, but I believe that there were still some similarities of how the old Peter Parker, the old how Toby Maguire took on the performance for Peter Parker. He was nerdy, yes, very nerdy, and I think he did a great job as that taking that role. But I do believe that Andrew Garfield tried his best because, first of all, he tried to differentiate his character from the other Peter Parkers from the other universes. Um, I still think he's a nerd because, of course, he's very intelligent. He's a very intellectual individual, and I really thought Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was just this quiet kid. And it may have seemed like he was a jock at first, but I think the quality of him being the quiet kid uh, overweighed his jockiness, if that makes any sense. And I personally think that for Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, he did he did a pretty decent job. He wasn't nerdy enough, that's for sure. So I will take that he is not nerdy enough, but I do believe that he tried to mix things up, spice things into a different form, so it wouldn't feel like the same Peter Parker from every other universe. Now, his portrayal for Spider-Man was unbelievably magnificent. I thought Andrew Garfield did a fantastic, divine job at being Spider-Man. I really think he hit the spot. He for sure had so much fun with it. I could see that he was having a blast playing the Spider-Man, and there was just so much energy behind Andrew Garfield. There was so much passion that devoted him, and it lifted him up to play the best Spider-Man that, in my opinion, could have been. Um, and just remember, this is my opinion, guys. So please, I'd like to discuss this on the comments. But this is just my opinion. Everybody has their own tastes, but I really think Andrew Garfield for sure played a magnificent, tremendous role as Spider-Man. Okay, moving down to the plot. I think the plot and with the lizard and the serum was by far one of the most interesting and unique setups I've seen for a Marvel movie. Usually, the Marvel villains, per se, if you want to call them that, I guess, they are villains, but everybody has a different viewpoint. But let's just say these villains always have a plan or an ideology of theirs, or simply they don't really have an ideology. They kind of just do things because maybe they have had a traumatizing past. They seek revenge. They despise a certain group, and I believe that within that, because so many villains have different ideologies and plans, and or just how they motivate, how their motivations are. Each and every single villain has um, pretty much played differently in how I've seen in the Marvel universe, and and of course here in Spider-Man. But I believe, if I can remember the name of the doctor, Connors. I don't know if it was Connors or, but basically the man who had the serum, the liquid, to inject into the body to be able to regenerate limbs. And I think what his ideology, his reasoning for doing the things he did was pretty obvious, self-explanatory. Um, Obviously, you may not agree with it, but I saw the direction that he was heading. I understood it, even if I may not agree with it, even if I think there's many consequences that come with that action. I do understand where he is coming from with the motivation, with the intentions, what he wanted for the people of New York. Um, so I think for sure the plot may have been, um, how do I say, derivative? Is that the word? I'm not sure, but the plot is definitely, a lot of people think different things. It's kind of um, a divided, um, how do I say, like people are divided on the plot of this, the Amazing Spider-Man, and I think that they went on a path that was a little different. It, maybe similar to other ideas and to from other movies, but I for sure think that he only had good intentions, that the villain per se tried to have good intentions, and he wanted just to aid the people with the disabilities, wanted to help those in need. I just think, when you really put your thought into it, how would it affect the babies, or how would it affect people who don't have disabilities? You know what I mean? And that's where you can look at it in a way where you can say, yeah, that's wrong. He was not thinking properly. He was not looking at the consequences. He just thought he was doing the right thing and aimed to literally shoot up this, liquid, this sort of serum, and thought that he was going to help the world, when in reality there are consequences to certain actions. To every action, there's consequences to every action, and I believe that even though I understood where he was coming from, uh, his uh, his his how do I say it? His intentions, or his lack of understanding, his lack of knowledge of how it would have played out, um, for a scientist, seems off. You'd think a scientist would be clever in how they would set forth their plans, but no, not Connors, if I'm correct with the name. He just was really excited. He wanted to put this out. He thought this was the next big thing, which in a way it was, but he was a little too excited and he just pushed it out there. He forced it. And that's the problem. When he forced that, other people are not going to be agreeing to that. There has to be consent. That's what he messed up on. That's what his flaws, his errors, that landed him, that led him to be in jail. So I try to look at in the pros and cons, because although I am defending this movie, I do want to like list out at least some flaws within this movie. I do believe that there was so much potential in this. I felt it would have been nice to see a third Amazing Spider-Man, because of course there's the second one, which I'm not gonna do a merit mentions, just because I do think that one was more flawed than the first one. The Amazing Spider-Man one, I believe, was more of an underrated, um, underlooked movie. It's frowned upon, but people don't really take the opportunity to maybe watch it again, or maybe analyze it, observe it to the point where you can find as many benefits, as many positives as negatives. And I think that was the downfall of the Amazing Spider-Man. Pretty much when the second one came out. The first one, I think it was all right. Like people were okay with it, or the only thing was like the suit was bothering people. But other than that, I thought the Amazing Spider-Man was fantastic. Though it's too bad that they wouldn't make a third one. But you never know in the future. You never know how things will play out. If they do make another one with Andrew Garfield, it's all up for debate, really. But um, any additional things that I would say is I think the CGI is outstanding. It's top notch, beautiful CGI that you would not see often in movies these days because um, now these days the CGI is in a way getting worse. But back then in 2012, it was pretty spot on. Uh, the CGI was just phenomenal, and you could look at it, and it was such a breathtaking experience to see in movie theaters. I think that's one of the definitely big pluses of this movie. Um, and I definitely felt like the emotional standpoint between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, both their characters and how they match, their interactions are absolutely adorable, of course. You know, it may be a little too adorable at times, but I think I find it to be one of those too good to be true type relationships, but it developed into something really beautiful, and I thought that was something very heartfelt. So, um, no spoilers, of course, but I absolutely did feel the emotion between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy in this movie. So for sure, the acting was extraordinary. I felt those emotional punches, and the action sequences were like haunting. They were hauntingly beautiful. They were intense as they could be. And one of my favorite scenes is when Spider-Man faces off the Lizard at the high school, and they're battling it off. And it is such a groundbreaking experience to see those two headbutt each other. And I really thought that there was one little sequence or little part of that fight scene where they're in this hallway, and it's like a glass hallway, and Spider-Man begins to start like web cocooning the Lizard, starts crawling around him like an actual spider. It was one of the most bizarre, unique things they did in this movie, and I'm never going to forget that. I really think for sure they had a lot of good um, ideas for this movie. They laid it out in such a way where it really is different from the other Spider-Man movies. You could feel the difference. You could feel this was it felt almost fresh, and it almost felt like this new beginning, a new start. Um, and that's why I would have loved to see a third one. But of course, you know, things happen. Not every movie gets to have that chance. You know, you gotta just try to give the movie some cut the movie some slack a little bit because um, I think for sure it tried its best to be a Spider-Man movie. I think Andrew Garfield did a tremendous job trying to portray that character. Emma Stone did a wonderful performance as Gwen Stacy. Their relationships were great. Uncle Ben, very saddening. Of course, everybody knows what happens to Uncle Ben. I also want to mention about that Uncle Ben. That's another thing I want to mention. Uh, if you don't know what happens to Uncle Ben because you've never watched Spider-Man, you have to watch Spider-Man. I will not. I need to spoil it, but I mean, you know, it's. I mean, I guess I can spoil it because everybody knows. But you know, when Uncle Ben's death happened, I feel like he didn't want to die, because a lot of people think that, oh, he just wanted to end his own life, or he did that because, this and that. And I really didn't feel that. Obviously, I just think that he saw an opportunity of someone being a thief, someone doing something, a misdemeanor or anything of that sort, and he just wanted to help. He knew that